Hello and welcome to this week's Rush through the weekly rushes. Sorry, I didn't mean to sound quite so deranged. I've got my coffee, I've got my bipolar meds, I have an inhaler in case the news gets too excited, and I have a full can of Pepsi, and if I go on a bit too much, you can always just go, shut the fuck up. So as I said, welcome to this week's roundup of the weekly movie and streaming news. Obviously the last few weeks I've been obsessed with Will Smith. Finally, he's in our rearview mirror. See you, Will. But coming up on the inside is Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Not an awful lot to be said about this other than it's happening. It's happening in a courthouse in Virginia. Johnny Depp is suing Amber Heard for an op-ed piece she did in 2018 where she talked about being the victim of domestic abuse. She didn't name him, but it doesn't take a genius to know who she was referring to or inferring. He claims he's suing her for $50 million, which I think sounds not a lot, $50 million, if you think of how much money he will have lost for losing his parts in things like Pirates of the Caribbean and Fantastic Beasts, what have you. So yeah, he's suing Amber Heard for $50 million. She's counter-suing, accusing him of being a nuisance, essentially, or the legal term of being a nuisance. They're locking horns. Some are saying, come on, Johnny, let it go. This woman just wants to be a mum, let her get on with her life. Other people are saying, come on, Amber, admit it, you showed no bruising, you showed no injuries, you're making it all up. And already on the witness stand have been friends, associates, neighbours, assistants, and what have you. And it seems to be a clear consensus of opinion that whatever was going on between them, I think there was a couples counsellor, one of their couples counsellors has stood up and testified, and one of the assistants saying, that they're both engaged in, or were engaged in, a massive amount of mutual abuse. And I think mutual abuse is an important phrase to use about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, because I think we're never going to be able to get in there and quantify with any accuracy or certainty who was responsible for what, who did more to whom, and whether people are sort of, engaged in sort of, exaggeration or hyperbole and stuff like that. But one thing that I do think needs to be up for debate is, let's assume that, they were both engaged in a degree of mutual abuse. It ran both ways. Has a miscarriage of justice happened to some extent then, if it's an equalised state of responsibility for the nature of their relationship? Has a miscarriage of justice already taken place in that Johnny Depp is more being, is targeted more as the one who's done wrong, and he's the one that's tarnished with the term domestic abuser, when if it was an equalised scenario, an unfortunate and equalised scenario, how can they make sure that there's a sort of equality or equanimity in terms of how the fallout of this lands? And maybe, I think Johnny Depp's counsel would be best advised to go down the route of saying, well, let's equalise the responsibility here rather than pretend Johnny Depp has no responsibility for it. Sort of, I would, if I was Johnny Depp's counsel, say, fall on your sword a little bit and say, look, we were both bad, we were both wrong. I think we both need to acknowledge it was a dysfunctional relationship that went to ludicrous levels, and we both share some culpability in it. And I think that way they could both escape from this somewhat more intact, without their reputations in tatters and without these incredibly sort of, loyal but extremist groups on either side saying it's all Depp or it's all Heard. It can't be all one or the other. There's clearly, they're both at fault in different ways. At the opposite end of the spectrum, got Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Will Ferrell and Barbie. Can't ever say that I thought I would use the words Will Ferrell and Barbie in the same sentence. Well, Will Ferrell is the latest high-profile actor to join the Greta Gerwig film Barbie, based on the Mattel character featuring Barbie and Ken. Ryan Gosling is cast to play Ken. Margot Robbie is cast to play Barbie. And there's no discussion as yet as to who Will Ferrell will be playing in the film. Simu Liu, who played Shang-Chi in the Marvel movie, he's also been cast in there. And Greta Gerwig is co-scripting this. She's directing, but she's co-scripting it with her partner Noah Baumbach, who was also responsible for Marriage Story. We've said it before. Is this, I've asked the question, could it be like a Disney Enchanted thing where, there's a knock on the head and we go from animated Barbie into real Barbie? Or are we literally going to park Barbie in a sort of modern day New York as this character called Barbie and Ken, and they're going to normalise it into a kind of Woody Allen-esque kind of comedy? I can't see either one of those equations working myself. So, watch this space. It's going to be fascinating to see how Barbie is made cool, how Barbie is made hip, how Barbie is made art house. Are we getting the wrong end of the stick? I mean, Will Ferrell clearly gives us an indicator that we're going down a comedic route. Now, earlier this week on our Instagram, Popcorn Junkies Instagram account, we talked about the fact that everyone was getting stupidly excited, us included, that David Lynch was releasing a new film and that he was doing it on the quiet. He'd shot it on the quiet. It featured Laura Dern. It possibly was going to feature all sorts of other sort of David Lynchian regulars, music by Angelo Badalamenti, all that kind of stuff. And this film, this secret film that's been filmed in secret, was going to be released or announced at the Cannes Film Festival as they unleashed the schedule for the Cannes Film Festival. That was the exciting part of it. It was really exciting. But the update to that is that no, it's not happening. David Lynch himself has refuted the reports. As you're going to find out in a minute, Cannes made their announcement of what's going to be shown at the Cannes Film Festival this year, and conspicuous by its absence was absolutely no mention of a David Lynch film. This is what David Lynch said when all of this kind of excitement and whisperings and kind of, you know, Chinese whispers was going on all around him. He said, "It's not happening. I don't have a project. I have nothing at Cannes. It's unfortunate. It got built up that people thought, oh, that'd be nice. But there is something new, but it's not mine." What's he talking about? He's talking in riddles. I don't know whose it is. They say there's something new at Cannes, and they don't say whose it is. And some people thought it was my film, but it's not. So we'll wait and see whose it is. What? So, could there still be a film that's being released at the Cannes Film Festival by an as yet unrecognised and unidentifiable director that's going to be revealed to us that it's David Lynch? Haven't got a clue, but put it this way, it was very disappointing when Cannes announced the lineup. There was no Lynchian film there. So yeah, transcendental kind of meditation, even the powers of transcendental meditation didn't allow us to materialise something that, I have to say, after his last film, Inland Empire, and what Jack did next, or whatever, what did Jack do, that short film that he did for Netflix, I personally am desperate for the world of David Lynch to re-emerge in some strange, twisted oddity beyond just his weather reports and his magic numbers on his YouTube channel. But sadly, it was not to be the case. Coffee time. Ooh. Yeah. Rat-a-ta-ta-ta. So, of course, the Cannes lineup was released this week. It was announced. Sans Lynch. In there, films by the likes of David Cronenberg, Park Chan-wook, Old Boy, and George Miller, director of Mad Max Fury Road and lots of the original Mad Max films. What other treats are there that have been announced at this year's Cannes lineup? Cannes Film Festival is a crazy circus of cinematic excess and film brokering deals and all sorts of crackpot stuff. So I think this being the first proper year after COVID, where it's not going to be a virtual event, I think we can look forward to all sorts of snazzy photos along Le Croisette. I had the privilege years ago of covering it as a correspondent on 2 different occasions, and journalists do quite literally go mad trying to secure this exclusive or this, you know, this interview with that sort of star, or you get shifted up and down the kind of pecking order of suddenly you get a phone call going, yes, you can interview, I don't know, Josh Brolin just at a minute's drop of a hat. And you know, I remember interviewing the likes of people like Gerard Depardieu, John Waters, Robin Williams. I remember going to the urinal, I remember going to a toilet, standing at the urinal looking to my left, and who was next to me? Dennis Hopper, who then wanted to become friends. We tried to get an interview with him, he introduced us to his girlfriend, then we got an interview with him the next day. You know, it's that kind of crazy, walk into a restaurant, walk out arm in arm with Dennis Hopper. It's that kind of a place. It is crazy. Dreams are made and dreams are shattered in Cannes. It's often a festival where, you know, mainstream blockbuster films are given a first release or a first screening, and so you get this weird heady mix of art house eccentricity and mainstream blockbuster. And this year you've got Top Gun Maverick, starring Tom Cruise, that's being shown there. Baz Luhrmann's biopic Elvis, that's going to be screened as well. There's a new movie coming from James Gray, who gave us Ad Astra, the Brad Pitt sort of going in search of my father in space shtick. He's doing a film called Armageddon Time, which is a coming-of-age tale about growing up in Queens in the 80s. It stars Anne Hathaway, Anthony Hopkins, and it also features Succession's, the series Succession's Jeremy Strong. George Miller, director of Mad Max Fury Road, he's got a new fantasy romance opening at Cannes, starring Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton. That makes the list. Old Boy director and The Handmaiden director director, Park Chan-wook, has a new film called Decision to Leave. Always intriguing, always interesting to see what he's up to, especially if you've ever seen the original Old Boy film. Quite a remarkable movie. Big news for sort of body horror fans is David Cronenberg is back. He releases Crimes of the Future, of which there is a teaser or trailer that's just landed. Me and Nanny Di will be reacting to that. This is a film, let me just read you the blurb. This is a film set in a time when the human species is adapting to a synthetic environment through new transformations and mutations. It stars Viggo Mortensen, it also stars Léa Seydoux, and it also features Kristen Stewart in there too. Ethan Cohen has got Jerry Lewis, Trouble in Mind, a new film, a solo film from him. Claire Denis has got a new movie called The Stars at Noon, starring Taron Egerton and Robert Pattinson, who obviously she worked with on High Life. And the director of First Cow, Kelly Reichardt, and First Cow is a cracking movie, do check it out. She's also got a new film called Showing Up. And Elvis Presley's granddaughter, Riley Keough, she has her first co-directorial debut at the festival with Beast. She was recently seen in the indie film Zola. So there's a lot there to sink our teeth into. Looking forward to what first reports are. Be interesting to see what's in competition. So, you know, maybe we could do some sort of Cannes reports when the Cannes Film Festival gets going. Talking of Kristen Stewart, obviously hot off her Oscar nomination for her turn as Lady Diana in Spencer, Pablo Larraín's biopic of Lady Diana. Kristen Stewart, one of the big stars in a casting film, a sort of romantic thriller it's being called, though if A24, the producers, are anything to go by, it'll probably defy any sort of genre, strictly. It's called Love, Lies, Bleeding. We mentioned this also on our Popcorn Junkies Instagram account. It's a film directed by the director of Saint Maud, which was the curious film about a nun who was obsessed with a patient. It became very twisted, set in a sort of seaside resort in England. This new film's directed by Rose Glass, who directed Saint Maud. But this film centres on the world of female bodybuilding. And just quickly, to stress this quickly, Kristen Stewart is not going to be a bodybuilder in it, but she is going to play the partner, the romantic partner of a bodybuilder. So it'll be a lesbian relationship set within the heady world of female bodybuilding. And by all accounts, she's playing a protective lover within this competitive and incredibly sort of, you know, unexplored world. I mean, we often get the world of bodybuilders dealt with. I know that Arnold Schwarzenegger film years ago, was it Pumping Iron, the documentary, which kind of first brought Schwarzenegger to the attention of the world. You know, focusing in on the female world of bodybuilding, I think that's going to be intriguing and interesting. So I think that's to look forward to with Kristen Stewart. Lots of dramas on sets at the moment. Salma Hayek has replaced, I'm going to call Tandy Newton because I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce her name now. Is it Tandiwe Newton? Tandy Newton is being replaced by Salma Hayek on the third instalment of Magic Mike. I think it's called Magic Mike's Last Dance, being directed by Steve Soderbergh, obviously starring Channing Tatum, who's also working on it as a producer. And yeah, so the story runs that Salma Hayek has replaced Tandy Newton because Tandy Newton has got personal issues in her life. This was after having shot, I think, something like 11 days already. They were already 11 days into production. Then the rumour mill started to swirl that perhaps all wasn't as it seemed. And Tandy Newton had to come out, and her agents had to come out and deny that she was actually fired from Magic Mike's Last Dance. The allegation being that she'd had a dispute or an argument with Channing Tatum on set. Tandy Newton's gone to great lengths to say that these are inaccurate. Will we ever know the truth about this? Will we ever know the truth? It's rarely the case that someone leaves a project so late or in such a progressed state of production without there being some kind of conflict at work somewhere. But anyway, so Tandy Newton is out, potentially around with Channing Tatum, and Salma Hayek is in. But is there an appetite for Magic Mike 3? I mean, I'm even surprised that Steven Soderbergh is making it. Is it camp? I've not seen any of the first two. Is it camp? Is there more to it than just stripping men? All I see from it is the fact that didn't the movies spawn the franchise of Magic Mike stage show that we now see? In which case, is it layered? Is it sophisticated? Is there a good story in it? I don't know. Last week we were talking about the new Netflix film called Damsel that Angela Bassett is joining Millie Bobby Brown on. It's a fantasy film, handsome princes. She plays a damsel in distress. She's put in a kind of cave. There's a dragon. Will she be rescued? All this kind of stuff going on for Millie Bobby Brown. But the cast is thickening out. The cast is getting bigger for this. We've got Robin Wright, who was Robin Wright Penn, obviously. She's in there from House of Cards. And then we got Ray Winston. Where has Ray Winston been? where has Ray Winston been? Well, he's coming back, and he's going to be in Damsel, which is the new Netflix film. So that's shaping up to be quite a big project for Netflix, and all the bigger, given that Millie Bobby Brown is at the helm of it. In other streaming news, the makers of Better Call Saul, or if you go to the Twitter, Better Call Saul's Twitter account, they have a photograph of Walt and Jesse, aka Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul, sat in a car, and it says this: they're coming back. In this very cluttered, busy, streaming environment, Breaking Bad seems like something from a bygone age, doesn't it? It was a precursor to so much of this Ozark and streaming, where you had real characterization across long series of episodes, and they ran on and on and on. Breaking Bad was the first sort of binge watchable streaming series I can think of that really earmarked the sort of arrival of Netflix viewing and all that kind of stuff. Well, Better Call Saul, as we know, is kind of coming to an end. I think there's a final season that's been split into two. It seems to be the thing Netflix do now with Ozark and Stranger Things, is like, final season, oh no, let's chop it into two. So final 2 seasons, really, that's what it amounts to. Peter Gould, one of the co-creators of Better Call Saul, says this: I don't want to spoil things for the audience, but I will say the first question we had when we started the show was, are we going to see Walt and Jesse on the show? Instead of evading it, I'll just say yeah. And as we can see from the Twitter account, there's a photograph of them, so they're going to feature. So Better Call Saul is going to go out with a bang. Now, I don't know if any of you remember, there was a sort of, was it a Breaking Bad sequel or prequel or something that kind of continued the Breaking Bad sort of franchise, and it wasn't that good, I seem to remember. I think it might have happened at the beginning of lockdown. I wasn't overly impressed with it. So on the one hand, it's exciting to see these characters come back, but on the other, sometimes you worry, can we really recapture the magic that we had in the first place? Not entirely sure. Sammy Davis Jr, the Rat Pack and all that kind of stuff. Sammy Davis Jr is getting his own limited series ordered from Hulu. It's starring Elijah Kelly, who is a major actor and singer and what have you. Hulu's ordered 8 episodes, and it's based on the book, or the Will Hager book, in black and white, The Life of Sammy Davis Jr. As I say, Elijah Kelly is going to be portraying the dancer, singer, the entertainer. And I always felt when in the 70s, I'd always look at Sammy Davis Jr. and feel like he was the put-upon member of the kind of Rat Pack. He was always the butt of jokes. He almost down to the fact that he was almost always looking up. I think he had one eye, didn't he? Did he have one eye? I think he had a glass eye. So he could barely see, he could barely sort of stand. He was the butt of jokes. And so obviously, there's been much discussion over the years regarding the latent racism within the group and the kind of, pushing him down the pecking order. The synopsis of this runs as follows. I think this is going to be rich, and I think it's a good time. I think there's a good opportunity here to rehabilitate and review and reskew Sammy Davis Jr.'s career, if you like. This is the blurb. Sammy Davis Jr. rose from childhood stardom on the vaudeville stage to become one of the most famous African-American entertainers of the 50s and 60s, and obviously also the only black member of the Rat Pack. At the same time, he spent most of his career surrounded by controversy and ridicule over his affairs with white film stars, his 1960 marriage to Swedish actress May Britt, his conversion to Judaism, his closeness to the Kennedys, and his problems with alcohol and drugs. And I also hope that they do deal with issues of race too. So it's a very colourful life, a very colourful career, like all of the Rat Pack members, but it's the one that we kind of have focused on least. So I think this could be quite a rich series. Who remembers Casper? Casper, the Friendly Ghost. I used to love that film. That was one of the first films, not one of the first films, it was one of those films where that sort of animation chained with live action was such a success. Casper, the Friendly Ghost. He's sort of one of those old-fashioned kind of comic. Didn't he come out in the 1940s, but in the late 1940s, 50s? I always think of Casper in the same breath as I think of Dan Dare and Eagle comics and all that kind of stuff. Peacock are developing a live-action horror adventure series which reimagines the origins of Casper, the Friendly Ghost. Are we going to see him pre-ghost, or is this going to be the origin story of a ghost? Is it going to be a baby ghost? Is it going to be how this ghost became this ghost? The blurb runs as follows. Set in high school, when a new family arrives in the small town of Eternal Falls, Casper finds himself entangled in a mystery uncovering dark secrets that have been buried for over 100 years. They're talking about this being sort of reminiscent of Riverdale's reworking, if you like, of the Archie comics. Are they going to give Casper the Friendly Ghost sort of comics, the comic strip aspect of that? Are they going to revitalise it and bring it into a sort of modern age? I hope it stays magical and a bit ghosty and a bit horror-y, but not in that way that sometimes Netflix series get, which is a bit naff. Neil Gaiman's been popping up quite a bit. Neil Gaiman must be one of the busiest kind of writers / comic book creators / graphic novel writers on the planet. Virtually everything he touches turns into a series. Dead Boys Detectives is another one of his works that he's worked on with DC Comics. It's by him, Neil Gaiman and Matt Wagner. This is Dead Boy Detectives is also being turned into a series for HBO Max. Yes, described as a ghost story exploring loss, grief and death through the lens of Edwin Payne and Charles Rowland, two dead British teenagers and their very alive friend called Crystal Palace. I kid you not, yeah. We virtually live on top of Crystal Palace, and the character is called Crystal Palace. This is yet another series of Gaiman's that's being given the green light. He made American Gods, which we've talked about before, 2 series, I think there were of that. Lucifer, he was responsible for Lucifer. Netflix is also prepping a series called The Sandman, based on his comic series there. Gaiman's also got an overall deal with Amazon. Of course, we've got Good Omens, of which a 2nd season is on the way on Amazon. And of course, there's the series Anansi Boys that we were talking about last week, which is also just cast Whoopi Goldberg as the Bird Woman, I think that's her name. So yeah, watch this space. If any Neil Gaiman fans out there, you're not going to have time to watch anything else. It's just going to be, they should have a channel, the Neil Gaiman channel. And final silly little story, Billie Eilish. Billie Eilish hits the Coachella, how do you say it? Coachella stage. She hits the main stage today at some point. Billie Eilish is, to coincide with her appearing on the main stage, Disney Plus are releasing a short film in which Billie Eilish joins The Simpsons, and it's simply called When Billie Met Lisa. Billie Eilish announced on Instagram recently that she and her brother will be appearing alongside The Simpsons. That's kind of an ambition for so many people, isn't it? And the short follows Lisa Simpson on her search for a quiet place to practice saxophone when she's suddenly discovered by Billie and Billie's brother, Phineas. The musical siblings then invite Lisa over to Billie's studio for a special jam session. And that will be premiering on Disney Plus to coincide with her performances at Coachella, which are today. And if you've watched this tomorrow, then it was yesterday. They've done, it's the 4th, I think, in a collection of shorts that have featured on Disney Plus. Some of them, another one was Maggie Simpson in The Force Awakens from its nap, and another was called The Good, the Bart and the Loki. So of course Disney are kind of hybridizing, they're sort of cross-pollinating, aren't they? Franchises and IP and sort of stables and imprints of Disney Plus like Marvel and Star Wars. They bring them all together and they're creating little Simpson-like byproducts. Which brings us to films of the week. And the big release of this week that I'm most excited about is The Northman, which is Robert Eggers' 3rd film. Robert Eggers gave us The Lighthouse, which was his 2nd movie, and of course his 1st movie was The Witch. The Northman, this is a story that's based on a Viking king, lord or child, a Viking prince who sees his father killed. It's alleged that this is the source material for Hamlet, and basically this is a film about a Viking played by Alexander Skarsgård as he avenges his father's death. Father played by Ethan Hawke, mother played by Nicole Kidman, Anya Taylor-Joy's in there, Bjork's in there. It's an astonishing cast. Willem Dafoe is in there again too. It looks, from the trailer, it looks absolutely full on. Apparently it's a film that was shot with lots and lots of long takes, with lots of extras, very complex scenes that had to be, if anything went wrong, they had to reset and go right back to the beginning, a little bit like the scenes in 1917. Alexander Skarsgård looks astonishing. It's going to really revitalise the whole Viking storytelling. It's co-written by Robert Eggers and Sion, I can't pronounce the name, S-J-I-O-N, Sion, who's a friend and colleague and co-Icelandic personage of Bjork. So this is going to be, I think it's going to be incredibly of the elements. It's going to be very magical. It's going to be incredibly prophetic. It's going to be incredibly violent. And I think, it feels like it's invested with all sorts of kind of ritual and spiritual and violence and lots of blood and lots of Viking sort of chopping and things like that. So it does look exciting, and I think that's the big release of this week. Next up is The Lost City, a sort of rom-com starring Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum. Yet again, Sandra Bullock luckily didn't have an argument with Channing Tatum and got to the end of this project. It also features Brad Pitt. I think she features as a romantic fiction author, and I think Channing Tatum is the model for the front cover of her book. They head off on some kind of madcap adventure. I think Daniel Radcliffe is in there playing a billionaire who they need to escape from, and Brad Pitt is also in there. I think Brad Pitt may feature as the fictionalized sort of character from Sandra Bullock's books. I'm a big fan of Sandra Bullock. I think she's sassy, I think she's funny, I think she's wisecracking and all that kind of stuff. Channing Tatum, loved him in Free Guy, a little cameo there. Not entirely sure about him when he carries an entire film. This hasn't got particularly great reviews, but if you fancy that sort of, I tell you what I'm getting vibes of. I'm getting vibes of Romancing the Stone. Do you remember that? The Kathleen Turner, Michael Douglas film from the 80s. And finally, Operation Mincemeat. This is a British film very British film about World War II, starring Matthew McFadden from Succession, possibly the greatest thing in Succession. He's a huge guilty pleasure. Colin Firth is in there too. And this pivots around a story that was to do, all tied up with British intelligence during World War II. The British intelligence services took the body of a tramp or a vagrant. They put false intelligence on him in order to kind of mislead the enemy when they stumbled across the body. So Operation Mincemeat, it's a pretty horrific, when you start to think about what Mincemeat is referring to, I think Operation Mincemeat is referring to kind of the dead body, I think. It's based on a book that kind of told the story of this. And I think, you know, for me, if there's one thing that's dragging me in to see this, it is Matthew McFadden. I can't get enough of him. So if you fancy a sort of Second World War espionage kind of atmospheric historical thriller, I think that's your best bet. And there you have this week's Rushed Rush through the weekly rushes. Tell us what you think about the stories we featured, and I hope you have a lovely weekend and week film watching.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.